Barry O'Farrell has come out firing over Sydney's rampant gun crime, blaming cuts to border security that allow gun smugglers to flourish here. While the federal government doesn't dispute the Premier's figures, it says it's time to work together on a solution.
It's not much of a contest. A woman trapped behind her counter at 5 a.m. yesterday versus a thug with a gun. Easy pickings for the bandit, though barely worth getting out of bed for just a handful of cigarette packs. Police suspect he's wielding a shotgun. He's in the minority. Almost every gun-related crime in New South Wales involves a handgun. Most of them, police say, are imported by criminal syndicates.
This is a cottage industry. That's worrying. Certainly worries police commissioners.
Today, police seized these pistols in the mail en route from Queensland to Moorebank, and these are a sample of some 3,000 illegal guns seized annually, including an Uzi machine pistol discovered at Campbelltown last weekend. It was definitely smuggled here.
Under the Howard government, 60% of all air cargo was inspected. Under the Rudd-Gillard government, it's now less than 10%.
Stop playing politics and work together in the interests of the people of Western Sydney. That's what they expect.
Most guns stolen from licensed owners here are rifles, and since most gun-related crime involves handguns, police conclude they're coming from overseas. They can't be sure of their origin though. In almost every case, the gun's serial number has been scratched off. The interception of Glock pistols at Sylvania Post Office last year, 220 in one seizure alone, is 3 times as many guns as those stolen in New South Wales every year. Robert Avadia, 7 News.
Anti-gun activists in the US have been pushing for gun law reform. Australia, having made substantial changes to its gun laws, is often held as an example.
Yeah, another bogus news media report on how gun control in Australia supposedly worked. I guess we'll have to go through all of this again.
The country has a very low rate of gun-related homicide when compared to the US, where people are at least 20 times more likely to be murdered by firearms.
Please tell me how cross-cultural statistics like this are at all relevant. Australia is a much more sparsely populated country than the US. Also, the Australian crime statistics report convictions, whereas the US statistics are all reported homicides, which include things like self-defense or even complete misreports. When you look at homicides cleared by arrest, the figure for 2016 drops to 3.2 in 100,000. And that's still going to be bigger than the number that's actually convicted. And there's also the inconvenient fact that these people keep ignoring. We have far greater homicide rates in the states and cities with strict gun control laws. They like pretending that the entire US is a free-for-all with firearms, when in many cases they're restricted just as much, if not more so, than they are in Australia and other countries. You might also want to explain why Switzerland has a lower homicide rate even though a greater number of households have firearms than the US. The fact is, doing this kind of cross-cultural comparison is completely bogus. A research paper on homicide statistics for the UK House of Commons found, care must be taken comparing crime rates across different countries, because not only social and economic conditions, but legal and criminal justice systems, the definition of criminal offenses, and counting rules may vary. The use of the term homicide to denote murder, manslaughter, and infanticide is common to many other countries, but not all. Some countries may include some or all aspects of causing death by dangerous driving as manslaughter. If there is to be any validity in cross-cultural comparisons, then instead of bogus cherry-picking, you need to look at the rates across all countries. And when you do that, you see that the gun homicide rate goes down the more guns a country has.
Researchers define mass shootings as 5 or more deaths, not including the perpetrator.
Now, do you see what I keep talking about? Over and over and over again, they said it was 4 or more deaths. Now it's been up to 5. Gee, I wonder why.
From 1979 to 1996, there were 13 mass shootings, resulting in over 100 deaths and more than 50 injuries. However, due to the gun lobby and politicians sympathetic to their firearm-owning voters, little was done to stop gun death. Armed with 2 rifles, an AR-15 and a .308 FN, Martin Bryant made his way through Port Arthur Historic Site, killing 35 people and injuring a further 23. Just 12 days later, the then Prime Minister John Howard pushed through a sweeping set of gun regulations, despite a lack of support from his rural constituency. The law says Australians need a genuine reason for having a firearm, such as sport shooting or for agricultural use. It doesn't include self-defence. People must go through background checks and wait 28 days before they can buy a gun. After the gun law reform, the total number of homicides involving a firearm decreased by half. The total number of gun-related deaths fell rapidly as well, dropping more than half in 2016 compared with 1996. Australia didn't see a single mass shooting from 1996 to 2018, more than 22 years.
And now you see why they changed it to 5, because if they kept it at 4 or more, they would have to admit that there were 4 mass shootings during that time period. And funny how in the US someone commits suicide in a parking lot and it's counted as a mass shooting. Give me a break. But as we keep pointing out, the weapon is irrelevant. If people who want to commit mass murder can't get a gun, they just do it with something else, like a car, which is what happened in Melbourne in January of 2017. So what happens when you look at all massacres? It's been 22 years since the Port Arthur massacre. During that time, there have been 105 deaths and 19 massacres. In the 22 years before the Port Arthur massacre, there were 91 deaths from 16 massacres. There were 3 fewer massacres and 14 fewer deaths in the comparable time period before Port Arthur than there was after. And that's not the only lie they told. Remember this part?
After the gun law reform, the total number of homicides involving a firearm decreased by half.
What do I keep telling you to ask whenever someone gives a figure like this? Compared to what? In this case, how does this number compare to the change in the gun homicide rate from before the 1996 gun ban? And would you look at that? The gun homicide rate was dropping at the same rate before the gun ban as it was after. In fact, a study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found no evidence of a statistically significant effect of gun control on the pre-existing downward trend of the firearm homicide rate, and said it wasn't possible to attribute any of the change in firearm deaths in Australia to the gun law reforms. This backs up a study published in the International Journal of Criminal Justice Sciences, which found, although the total number of published peer-reviewed studies based on time series data remains relatively small, fewer than 15 studies at the time of writing, none of these studies has found a significant impact of the Australian legislative changes on the pre-existing downward trend in firearm homicide. And you know what's missing from all these statistics? How often people use a gun to prevent a crime. In America, the few times people have directly studied the issue, they, including the CDC, come up with figures showing that people use a gun to stop a crime 5 to 7 times more often than someone uses a gun to commit a crime. Why do they never even try to count that? Something else that's suspiciously missing. You're also no longer comparing Australia to the US when homicides in the US were also cut in half around the same time period. Even though people have a lot more guns and people like you were predicting Armageddon when the so-called assault weapons ban expired.
However, anti-gun activists warned that following years of lobbying by pro-gun groups, Australia's strict gun laws have been eroded, and gun numbers are almost back to the same level as at the time of the Port Arthur massacre.
Wait, you know this, but you still pointed out that the gun homicide rate has been cut in half? So maybe it isn't the lack of firearms that's causing crime to drop. What, did you think people just wouldn't notice this?
In May 2018, a family of 7, including 4 children, were shot dead in an apparent murder-suicide.
Wait, earlier you said there were no mass shootings since Port Arthur. Remember this?
Australia didn't see a single mass shooting from 1996 to 2018.
So you knew you were lying!
Australia is not totally immune to mass shootings, but its response to the Port Arthur massacre demonstrated how strong political leadership and strict gun control policies can help curb violence and save lives.
Except they don't. You could only make that case by lying about the statistics. And that's what the media does, not just Bloomberg. It lies about guns. If these people really did care about reducing homicide, they'd tell you the truth instead of deliberately manipulating the statistics. But like all gun control nutbars, they care far more about pushing their own agenda than they do about the victims and their families. These people make me sick. Hey Hey, if you enjoyed this video, why not hit like and subscribe? And to make sure I can keep producing content, support this channel by becoming a patron. And check out all the other great content here, like this video selected especially for you.
But in 2007, police seized 4,900 firearms across the UK. CO19 alone are taking in hundreds of guns every year.
In these boxes we've got roughly a month's worth of firearms that have been seized off the streets of London. 400 firearms per month. It's an incredible statistic. This is basically a version of an AK-47. You'll empty this magazine in full auto mode in a couple of seconds. 300 to 400 a minute. In a crowded environment, that would be absolutely deadly. This is a 9mm Uzi submachine gun. Again, it's an extremely dangerous firearm. Extremely effective at close range and extremely dangerous. Various pistols here. The whole point of carrying a pistol around is it's light, concealable, and you know, it's got a decent rate of firepower. Got shotguns. They've all been shortened to some degree. You can much more easily conceal this. Very, very powerful, very versatile, very reliable. Extremely dangerous pieces of kit.
None of these weapons were handed in as part of an amnesty.
This is only 1 month's worth. We get this every single month, and this is just the ones that we're seizing. It certainly focuses our minds as to the sort of quantity and quality of firearms that are out and about there.
The days where you had the old-fashioned armed robber with the sawn-off shotgun, they tend to have disappeared. You know, they would just pull out the gun for that particular crime, shove it down their trousers or inside their raincoat, go in, do the armed robbery and walk out again. Our people are carrying the guns all the time. You know, they're with them 24 hours a day, so it has to be concealed so that we and the public don't realise they're carrying a gun. Most of the people we deal with use every single type of gun you can imagine, from machine pistols to 38s to 45s to replicas to converted weapons.
It's totally out of control.
This police officer, who feared he'd lose his job for speaking out, asked to remain anonymous. He said for the first time ever, bobbies are carrying firearms, but they're still outgunned by criminals who can buy whatever they want on the black market.
Every officer now in this country gets issued with body armour. When I joined the police service back in the 80s, we didn't have any of this. We had a wooden truncheon and a set of chain link handcuffs. The firearms laws have been tightened up since. Why do we still need this equipment? Simply because the criminals have the weapons and they're prepared to use them.
Gun policy's gone tragically wrong, and police morale at an all-time low.
I feel let down by the politicians, by the senior management in the police, and I feel at present I cannot give the public the service they demand and expect.
And as this officer made very clear, it's a law built on a lie.
The politicians, basically, they have misled the public. They said, if we ban handguns, the country's going to be a safer place. They ban the handguns, the country is not a safer place. Why are British people not to be trusted? And I think that says a lot about the government.
Citizens left defenseless, now victims of the very laws passed to protect them.